The sun was setting low over the dusty plains of Arizona, casting long shadows across the rugged landscape. A lone rider approached a small, weathered ranch nestled at the edge of a sprawling desert. The rider, clad in a tattered black coat and wide-brimmed hat, carried himself with an air of danger that seemed to ripple through the very air around him. His name was Ezekiel Zeke Blackwood, one of the most notorious outlaws in the West, a man who defied every law, crossed every line, and laughed in the face of death itself. But tonight, something felt different. As Zeke dismounted his weary horse, he noticed a faint glow emanating from inside the cabin. It wasn't just any light. It was warm, inviting, almost comforting. Little did he know, this would be the night when everything he thought he understood about life and fate would come crashing down. Inside the cabin sat a young girl no older than 12, her blonde hair tied back into 2 braids that hung loosely over her shoulders. She sat by the fireplace, sketching furiously on a piece of paper with charcoal she'd salvaged from the embers. Her name was Clara Monroe, the daughter of a once prosperous rancher whose fortunes had dwindled along with the rains. Now, they lived in near isolation, surviving off what little the land could still provide. Clara looked up as the door creaked open, revealing the imposing figure of Zeke standing in the doorway. For a moment, neither spoke. The outlaw's piercing eyes scanned the room, taking in the sparse furnishings, the crackling fire, and finally resting on the child before him. "What do you want?" Clara asked boldly, though her voice trembled slightly. Her courage belied her fear, and Zeke found himself amused by her defiance. "I'm lost," he replied simply, stepping further into the cabin. "Thought maybe I could rest here for a while." "You're not welcome here," she said firmly, clutching the charcoal tightly in her hand. Zeke chuckled, leaning against the wall. "Ain't got much choice, kid. My horse is shot, and the nearest town's days away. Besides," he tilted his head, studying her more closely, "you don't look like someone who gets visitors often. Might as well make yourself useful." Clara glared at him but didn't argue. Instead, she returned to her drawing, determined to ignore the intruder. Zeke watched her for a moment, intrigued despite himself. There was something about the way she moved, so deliberate yet filled with purpose, that caught his attention. Against his better judgment, he walked over to where she sat. "What's that?" he asked, pointing to the crumpled sheet of paper on her lap. "It's none of your business," she snapped, quickly hiding the drawing behind her back. "Oh, come now." Zeke grinned wickedly, snatching the paper from her grasp before she could stop him. "Let's see what we've got here." Clara lunged forward, trying to grab it back, but Zeke held it out of reach. His laughter echoed through the cabin as he unfolded the page and examined the crude yet strangely detailed illustration. It depicted a man, clearly meant to represent him, standing beneath a gallows, surrounded by a crowd of jeering townsfolk. Above him loomed a dark storm cloud, lightning striking ominously in the background. "Is this supposed to be me?" Zeke asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because if it is, sweetheart, you've got quite the imagination. It's not supposed to be funny." Clara cried, her face flushed with anger. "That's what's going to happen to you. You'll get caught and they'll hang you." Zeke burst into laughter again, shaking his head in disbelief. "And here, I thought you were just some scared little girl. Turns out you've got a mouth on you, too. But it's true," Clara insisted, tears welling up in her eyes. "I've seen it in my dreams. Every night, I dream about bad men getting punished for their crimes. And last night, I dreamed about you." Zeke's amusement faded slightly at her earnest tone, but he dismissed it with another wave of his hand. "Dreams don't mean nothing, kid. People say all kinds of things when they're scared or tired. Don't let them fool you." He tossed the drawing onto the table and turned away, settling down near the fire. Despite his outward confidence, however, the image lingered in his mind. It gnawed at him, stirring memories he'd buried deep within himself. The faces of those he'd wronged, the lives he'd ruined, the promises he'd broken. But he shook off the unease, convincing himself that it was merely the product of a child's overactive imagination. Over the next few days, Zeke remained at the ranch, unwilling, or perhaps unable, to leave. During that time, he learned more about Clara and her family. Her father had died years ago in a mining accident, leaving her mother to care for the property alone. When drought struck the region, the crops failed and the cattle perished, forcing them to sell off most of their land. Now, only the tiny cabin and a small plot of barren earth remained. Despite their hardships, Clara never complained. She worked tirelessly alongside her mother, maintaining the homestead and finding ways to survive. Her resilience impressed even Zeke, who often found himself watching her from afar, marveling at her strength in the face of adversity. One evening, as the stars began to twinkle above the horizon, Zeke joined Clara outside. They sat together on the porch, listening to the distant howls of coyotes and the gentle rustle of the wind through the dry grass. "Why do you draw those pictures?" Zeke asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Clara hesitated, then shrugged. "I don't know. They just come to me. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, and I have to write them down or draw them before I forget. And they always show bad things happening." Zeke pressed, his curiosity piqued. "Not always," Clara admitted. "Sometimes they show good things too, like rain coming after a drought or people finding each other again. But mostly it's warnings." Zeke nodded slowly, digesting her words. "Do you believe in fate, kid?" Clara tilted her head, considering the question. "I think some things are meant to happen, whether we like it or not, but I also think we can change them if we try hard enough." Her answer struck a chord within Zeke, though he refused to acknowledge it. Fate was something he had long since stopped believing in. In his world, there were only choices, right or wrong, fight or flight, live or die. Yet, as he gazed up at the starry sky, he couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps there was more to life than he had ever allowed himself to consider. Days turned into weeks, and Zeke found himself growing increasingly attached to the Monroes' humble existence. For the first time in years, he experienced moments of peace, free from the constant pursuit of bounty hunters and the weight of his own misdeeds. But deep down, he knew he couldn't stay forever. Sooner or later, the past would catch up with him, and when it did, there would be no escape. One fateful morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, Zeke awoke to the sound of hoofbeats thundering toward the ranch. Grabbing his revolver, he stepped outside to find a posse of deputies closing in fast. Leading the group was Sheriff Thomas Grayson, a man Zeke had encountered many times before and always managed to outwit. Well, looks like our luck's run out," Zeke muttered under his breath, backing toward the cabin. Clara emerged from inside, her eyes wide with panic. "Go inside," Zeke ordered, shoving her gently toward the door. "Stay hidden." "But—" Clara started to protest. "No buts," Zeke snapped, his voice sharp. "Just do as I say." Reluctantly, Clara obeyed, disappearing into the safety of the cabin. Outside, the showdown began. Bullets flew as Zeke fought fiercely, using every trick and skill he possessed to fend off his attackers. But the odds were against him, and soon he found himself cornered, his ammunition nearly depleted. As the dust settled, Sheriff Grayson stepped forward, gun drawn. "It's over, Blackwood," he growled. "Time to pay for your sins." Zeke spat blood onto the ground, his body riddled with wounds. "Guess you're right, Sheriff. But tell me this. How's it feel knowing you're sending an innocent man to his grave?" Grayson frowned, confused. "Innocent? You've killed dozens of people, robbed banks, burned entire towns to the ground. Don't insult my intelligence." Zeke smirked weakly, reaching into his coat pocket. Pulling out the crumpled drawing Clara had made weeks earlier, he handed it to the sheriff. "Take a look at this. Then tell me how innocent the first really am." Grayson unfolded the paper, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. The image depicted exactly what had just occurred. Zeke standing beneath a makeshift gallows, surrounded by deputies, with a storm cloud looming overhead. Even the details were eerily accurate. The positions of the men, the angle of the sun, the very expression on Zeke's face. "What sorcery is this?" Grayson whispered, staring at the drawing in disbelief. "It's not sorcery," Zeke replied softly. "It's fate. Something I should have listened to a long time ago." With that, Zeke closed his eyes, accepting his inevitable end. As the sheriff raised his gun, preparing to deliver the final blow, a sudden gust of wind swept through the valley, carrying with it the faintest whisper of Clara's voice. Maybe it's not too late. The shot rang out, echoing across the desolate plains. But instead of falling lifeless to the ground, Zeke stumbled backward, gasping for air. To everyone's astonishment, the bullet had missed its mark, lodging harmlessly in the wooden post beside him. What in God's name just happened? Grayson exclaimed, lowering his weapon. Zeke opened his eyes, his heart pounding with renewed hope, looking toward the cabin. He saw Clara standing in the doorway, her hands clasped tightly together as if in prayer. Her eyes met his, filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "You changed it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You chose differently." For the first time in years, Zeke felt a flicker of redemption stir within him. Turning to the sheriff, he held up his empty hands. "You heard the kid. Let's finish this properly." Grayson hesitated, torn between duty and disbelief. Finally, he holstered his gun and motioned for his men to stand down. "We'll take you back to town, Blackwood. No hanging today. Maybe there's still time to make amends." As the deputies led Zeke away, Clara watched silently from the porch, tears streaming down her cheeks. Though the future remained uncertain, she knew one thing for certain. Sometimes, even the darkest hearts can find a path to light, if given the chance. The journey back to town was long and arduous, the sun blazing overhead as the posse made its way to the unforgiving desert. Zeke rode in silence, his thoughts a swirling tempest of doubt and hope. The image of Clara standing on the porch, her tear-streaked face etched with determination, haunted him. He had never believed in second chances. Until now. Sheriff Grayson rode beside him, glancing occasionally at the outlaw with an expression that wavered between distrust and curiosity. "You know," Grayson began, breaking the oppressive quiet, "I've chased you for years. Thought I knew everything about you. But this changes things." Zeke snorted softly, his voice gravelly from days without water. "What does it change, Sheriff? The facts are still the same. I've done bad things. Real bad things." "Aye," Grayson admitted, his grip tightening on the reins. "But maybe not all of them were your choice. Maybe some of them weren't even real." Zeke shot him a sharp glance, surprised by the sheriff's unexpected empathy. "You think too much, Grayson. A man like me don't deserve no pity." "Pity ain't what I'm offering," Grayson replied firmly. "What I'm saying is, there's more to life than just doing what comes easy. You got a chance here, Blackwood, a real one. Don't squander it, because you're too stubborn to admit you might be worth saving." The words hung heavy in the air, sinking into Zeke's soul like a blade. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to consider the possibility that he wasn't beyond redemption, that perhaps, just perhaps, there was a part of him worth preserving. By nightfall, they reached the outskirts of Tombstone, the dusty streets lined with saloons and general stores. Lanterns flickered in the windows, casting golden light onto the cobblestones. As the posse entered the town square, a crowd began to gather, curious faces peering out from behind curtains and doorways. Word spread quickly about the capture of Ezekiel Blackwood, the infamous outlaw whose name struck fear into the hearts of men and women alike. Whispers filled the air, tales of his crimes whispered in hushed tones. Yet amidst the murmurs of hatred and vengeance, there were also voices of caution, those who had heard of strange events surrounding his arrest. Inside the jailhouse, Grayson locked Zeke in a cell, the iron bars clanging shut with finality. Zeke sat on the hard bench, his head bowed as he stared at the floor. The weight of his past pressed down upon him, threatening to crush the fragile hope that had taken root in his heart. Hours passed, the night growing darker as the moon climbed higher in the sky. Just as Zeke thought he would be left alone with his thoughts, a soft knock echoed against the wooden door. Moments later, Clara appeared, her small frame silhouetted by the dim lantern light. "Clara?" Zeke whispered, rising to his feet. "What are you doing here?" She stepped closer, her blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I had to see you. To make sure you're really okay." "I'm fine," Zeke said gruffly, though his voice betrayed the emotion churning beneath the surface. "You shouldn't have come. This ain't safe for someone like you." Clara shook her head defiantly. "Safe or not, you're important to me, Zeke." You helped us when no one else would. And now it's my turn to help you." Before Zeke could respond, Clara reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to him through the bars, her hands trembling slightly. Unfolding it, Zeke saw another drawing, one unlike any he'd seen before. It depicted a man walking away from a gallows, his head held high, surrounded by a field of blooming wildflowers. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's what happens next," Clara explained, her voice soft but resolute. "If you choose to walk away from all the bad things, if you decide to do good instead of evil." Zeke stared at the drawing for a long moment, his mind racing. Could it truly be that simple? Could he abandon his old ways, leave behind the violence and chaos that had defined his existence for so long? Or was this merely another cruel trick of fate? "But how?" he finally asked, looking up at Clara. "How do I start over? How do I undo everything I've done?" "You can't undo it," Clara admitted honestly. "But you can try to fix it, one step at a time. Help people. Make amends. Show the world and yourself that you're not the monster everyone thinks you are." Her words resonated deep within him, stirring something long dormant. For the first time in years, Zeke felt a spark of purpose ignite within his chest. He realized then that Clara wasn't just a child with a peculiar gift. She was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the darkest souls could find their way back to the light. Dawn broke over Tombstone, bathing the town in a soft, golden glow. Sheriff Grayson arrived at the jailhouse, accompanied by several townsfolk eager to witness the fate of the notorious outlaw. Expecting resistance, Grayson was surprised to find Zeke waiting patiently, his expression calm yet resolute. "I'm ready," Zeke declared, stepping forward. "Whatever comes next, I'll face it head-on. No running, no hiding, just doing what's right." Grayson nodded approvingly, unlocking the cell. "Then let's get started." As the day unfolded, Zeke embarked on a journey of transformation, one that would test his resolve and challenge everything he thought he knew about himself. Under the watchful eye of Sheriff Grayson and guided by the unwavering belief of Clara Monroe, he began to rebuild his life, brick by painstaking brick. Little did they know, however, that the road ahead would be fraught with peril. Enemies old and new emerged from the shadows, determined to drag Zeke back into the darkness he had fought so hard to escape. And lurking in the distance, a storm brewed, a storm that threatened not only Zeke's newfound peace, but the very survival of those he had come to care for. Yet through it all, one truth remained constant. Sometimes, the most unlikely heroes rise from the ashes of their past, driven by forces greater than themselves. Forces like love, courage, and the unyielding power of faith. The days that followed were a blur of uncertainty and resolve. Zeke, now freed under the watchful eye of Sheriff Grayson, found himself thrust into a world he barely recognized, a world where redemption wasn't just a distant dream, but a tangible possibility. The townsfolk of Tombstone, however, were not so quick to forgive or forget. Whispers followed him wherever he went, their eyes narrowing with suspicion whenever he passed by. Some crossed the street to avoid him. Others muttered curses under their breath. But Zeke bore it all with surprising grace, his jaw clenched tight as he walked through the streets, head held high. He had made a choice, to walk away from the life of crime and violence that had defined him for so long, and nothing would sway him from that path, not even the jeers of those who believed he was beyond saving. His first act of penance came unexpectedly one morning, when a fire broke out in the town's general store. Flames licked at the wooden walls, sending plumes of smoke spiraling into the sky. Panic erupted among the townsfolk, many of whom scrambled to save what little they could from the inferno. Zeke, standing on the edge of the crowd, hesitated only briefly before diving into the chaos. Inside the burning building, he fought through choking smoke and searing heat, dragging crates of supplies and precious belongings to safety. When the owner, an elderly man named Mr. Jenkins, collapsed in despair upon realizing his ledger book was still inside, Zeke didn't hesitate. Despite the roaring flames and collapsing beams, he re-entered the inferno, emerging moments later with a charred but intact ledger clutched in his hands. The crowd gasped in awe as Zeke staggered out, coughing violently, his face blackened with soot. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, Slowly, applause rippled to the gathering, tentative at first, but growing louder until it filled the air. Even Sheriff Grayson, watching from the sidelines, nodded approvingly. "You did good today, Blackwood," Grayson said later that evening, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey at the local saloon. "Maybe you're not as lost as everyone thinks." Zeke accepted the drink, but didn't raise it to his lips. Instead, he stared into the amber liquid, his thoughts heavy. "It's easy to do something brave when there's no other choice," he replied quietly. "The real test is whether I can keep doing the right thing when no one's watching." Grayson raised an eyebrow but said nothing, leaving Zeke to his thoughts. As weeks turned into months, Zeke threw himself into helping the community. He repaired fences for struggling ranchers, dug irrigation ditches during the dry season, and even helped build a new schoolhouse for the children of Tombstone. Each task brought him closer to the people he once feared and despised, earning their trust one small gesture at a time. Clara visited often, her presence a source of comfort and inspiration. She brought him sketches she'd drawn, some depicting scenes of peace and prosperity, others warning of dangers yet to come. Though Zeke tried to dismiss them as mere coincidences, he couldn't deny the uncanny accuracy of her visions. They became a kind of compass for him, guiding his actions and decisions in ways he never thought possible. One afternoon, as they sat together beneath the shade of an ancient oak tree, Clara handed him a new drawing. This one showed a figure standing alone on a cliff overlooking a vast canyon, lightning striking behind him. The image sent a shiver down Zeke's spine. "What does this mean?" he asked, his voice low. Clara bit her lip, her expression troubled. "I'm not sure, but I think it's about danger. Something big. It involves you." Zeke frowned, folding the paper carefully and tucking it into his pocket. "Thanks for telling me, kid. I'll keep an eye out." But despite his outward calm, the warning gnawed at him, stirring memories of past confrontations and narrow escapes. He knew better than anyone that trouble rarely stayed away for long. His instincts proved correct sooner than he expected. One night, as Zeke returned from delivering firewood to an elderly widow, he noticed a group of strangers loitering near the outskirts of town. Their dark silhouettes stood out against the moonlit horizon, their intentions clear even from a distance. "Outlaws," Sheriff Grayson growled when Zeke reported the sighting. "Likely bounty hunters looking to collect on your head." Zeke shook his head grimly. "No, these aren't ordinary bounty hunters. There's something different about them." Grayson raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "They move like shadows," Zeke explained, recalling the way the men seemed to melt into the darkness. "And they carry weapons I've never seen before. Rifles with scopes, knives that glint like silver in the moonlight. Whoever they are, they mean business." The next day, tensions in Tombstone reached a boiling point. Rumors spread like wildfire about the mysterious riders camped just outside town. Some claimed they were part of a notorious gang known for their ruthlessness. Others whispered of darker forces at play, men who operated outside the law entirely, answering only to themselves. Zeke prepared for the inevitable confrontation, sharpening his knife and checking the load of his revolver. He knew the odds were stacked against him, but he also knew he couldn't let fear dictate his actions. If these men came for him, he wouldn't go down without a fight. When the attack finally came, it was swift and brutal. The strangers descended upon Tombstone under cover of night, their movements precise and calculated. Bullets flew, lanterns shattered, and chaos erupted throughout the streets. Zeke fought fiercely, using every skill and trick he'd learned over the years to fend off his attackers. But even his prowess couldn't match the overwhelming numbers arrayed against him. Just as hope began to fade, reinforcement arrived, townsfolk armed with pitchforks, rifles, and sheer determination. Together, they drove the invaders back, forcing them to retreat into the desert. As dawn broke over the battered town, Zeke surveyed the damage, his heart heavy with both relief and sorrow. "It's not over," Grayson warned, standing beside him. "These men won't give up easily." "No," Zeke agreed, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "But neither will I." In the days that followed, Zeke discovered the truth behind the mysterious attackers. They weren't ordinary outlaws, but members of a secret organization known only as the Order. Little was known about them except that they operated in the shadows, eliminating threats to their power and influence. Zeke realized then that his past crimes had placed him squarely in their crosshairs. But instead of succumbing to despair, Zeke chose to stand firm. With Clara's visions guiding him and the support of the townsfolk bolstering his resolve, he vowed to protect Tombstone and himself from the Order's deadly reach. And so, the battle continued, waged not just with guns and fists, but with courage, conviction, and the unyielding belief that even the darkest hearts can find their way back to the light. The days following the attack were tense, the air in Tombstone thick with unease. The townsfolk moved about their routines with wary eyes, glancing nervously at every shadow that flickered across the dusty streets. Zeke, too, felt the weight of impending danger pressing down on him like an unseen hand. He knew the Order wouldn't retreat for long. They were merely biding their time, planning their next move. Sheriff Grayson convened a meeting at the town hall, gathering the key members of the community to discuss strategies for defense. Zeke stood quietly in the corner, his arms crossed as he listened to the heated debates unfolding around him. Some argued for fortifying the town's perimeter, while others suggested forming alliances with neighboring settlements. Clara sat beside him, her small hands clasped tightly together, her expression solemn. Blackwood. Grayson said suddenly, turning to face him, "What do you think?" All eyes turned toward Zeke, who hesitated only briefly before speaking. "We can't just wait for them to come to us. They'll strike when we least expect it, hit hard and fast. If we're going to stop M, we need to take the fight to them." Murmurs rippled through the room, some approving, others skeptical. "And how exactly do you propose we do that?" one of the ranchers asked, his tone dripping with doubt. Zeke locked gazes with the man, his voice steady. "By finding out where they're based. If we know their hideout, we can ambush them before they have a chance to regroup." Grayson nodded thoughtfully. "It's risky, but it might be our only option. We'll need volunteers willing to scout the surrounding areas. Anyone interested?" A few hands went up, including Zeke's. Clara tugged at his sleeve, her blue eyes wide with concern. "Zeke, please don't go. It's too dangerous." He crouched down beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I have to, kid. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about protecting everyone here, including you." Reluctantly, Clara nodded, though tears shimmered in her eyes. As the meeting adjourned, Zeke prepared for his mission, loading his saddlebags with supplies and checking his weapons one last time. Before dawn broke, he rode out of town, accompanied by 2 trusted deputies, Tom and Hank, who had volunteered to join him. The journey took them deep into the heart of the desert, where the sun blazed mercilessly overhead and the wind carried the scent of scorched earth. They followed the trail left by the Order, tracking their movements through faint hoofprints and discarded scraps of cloth. By midday, they reached a narrow canyon flanked by jagged cliffs, its entrance shrouded in shadows. "This feels right," Tom muttered, squinting into the gloom. "Like something bad lives inside." Hank adjusted his hat, his grip tightening on his rifle. "Let's find out, then." They dismounted their horses, tethering them to a nearby rock formation before proceeding cautiously into the canyon. The deeper they ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Echoes of distant footsteps reverberated off the walls, making it difficult to discern reality from illusion. Suddenly, Zeke raised a hand, signaling for silence. A faint light glimmered ahead, emanating from what appeared to be a hidden cave system carved into the side of the cliff. Drawing their revolvers, the trio crept closer, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Inside the cave, they discovered a makeshift camp littered with crates of ammunition, maps marked with cryptic symbols, and tools of unknown purpose. But most unsettling of all was a series of portraits hanging on the walls, each depicting individuals marked for elimination by the Order. Among them was Zeke's own likeness, alongside Clara's innocent face. "They've been watching us," Zeke whispered, his voice laced with anger. "Watching everything." Before they could investigate further, a low growl echoed through the cavern. From the shadows emerged several figures clad in dark cloaks, their faces obscured by hoods. Without warning, they attacked, moving with unnatural speed and precision. The ensuing battle was brutal, each blow delivered with lethal intent. Zeke fought fiercely, his instincts honed by years of survival, guiding his every move. Yet even his skills struggled to match the overwhelming force arrayed against him. One by one, Tom and Hank fell, their bodies slumping lifelessly to the ground. Alone now, Zeke backed toward the entrance, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. His opponent, a towering figure whose cloak billowed like smoke, advanced steadily, a blade gleaming menacingly in the dim light. Just as all seemed lost, a sudden gust of wind swept through the canyon, carrying with it the unmistakable sound of gunfire. Reinforcements arrived, led by Sheriff Grayson and a group of armed townsfolk. Together, they overwhelmed the Order's forces, driving them back into the depths of the cave. In the aftermath, as the dust settled and the wounded were tended to, Zeke found himself once again questioning the nature of fate. Had Clara's visions truly saved him, or was it simply the power of determination that had carried him through? Whatever the answer, one thing was certain. The battle against the Order was far from over. Back in Tombstone, Clara greeted him with open arms, her face lighting up with relief. "You came back," she said simply, her voice trembling with emotion. "I told you I would," Zeke replied, ruffling her hair affectionately. "But this ain't over yet, kid. Not by a long shot." As the stars began to twinkle above the horizon, Zeke stood watch over the quiet town, his mind racing with plans and possibilities. Though the road ahead promised to be fraught with peril, he faced it with unwavering resolve. For the first time in his life, he wasn't fighting for himself alone. He was fighting for those who believed in him, for a future worth striving for. And somewhere, deep within his soul, a flicker of hope burned brightly, illuminating the path forward.